Well, let's do it. Shall we do another?
Yeah.
Great.
This is Out of the Dark, an audio series about Darke Hall, a theatre built in 1929 in Regina, Saskatchewan. In this series, we will explore Darke Hall by hearing the stories of people who've been touched by this historic performance space. I'm your host, Paul Deshane. Episode 1, What Makes a Great Theatre? Dear Sir, it has been my desire to at some time provide funds for the erection of a music and arts building on Regina College grounds, or other suitable site. In accordance with this purpose, I am now prepared to place in trust with a company to be named by your board first mortgages, title to improved farmlands, and fully paid stocks to the value of $100,000, to be held in trust for the college board until such time as they may consider it advisable to proceed with the construction of said buildings. The time of beginning construction and all other matters in connection with the building or buildings shall be under full control of the College Board, subject to the following conditions. The Board will agree not to mortgage or in any way encumber the said buildings and site, together with suitable approaches thereto, that the said Music and Arts building will be erected within 5 years of this date. While the proposed Music and Arts building is to be controlled by and primarily used as a college building, it is my desire and wish that insofar as it is feasible and not interfering with their usefulness for college purposes, that said buildings be made available for those of our citizens desiring to promote the higher things in life. With best wishes for the success of Regina College, I remain yours truly, F.N. Darke. That was the letter in which Francis Nicholson Darke informed the powers that be at Regina College, what would become in 1974 the University of Regina, that he would like to sponsor the construction of a music and arts building. Or, at the time, it was possible that there'd even be buildings, plural. However, once price tags started to roll in, the planning committee settled on a single auditorium with practice rooms and community space. The site ultimately chosen for this project was to the west of Regina College's buildings on College Avenue. Darke Hall is a red brick building with broad stairs in the front that lead up to a trio of arches that hang over 3 dark wooden doors. The base of the building is made of Tyndall stone, and stained glass windows decorate the east and western walls, and actually, media reporting from the time will do a better job of describing the building than I can. When the architectural plans for Darke Hall were revealed and tenders were being sought for construction, the Morning Leader, which would eventually become the Leader Post, ran an article about the project on the front page of their second section of the May 19, 1928 issue, 4 years to the day after Francis Darke sent his letter to Regina College's chairman. The Morning Leader article reads like this. Tenders will be called early next week for the construction of the Regina College Arts Building, which will contain an auditorium to seat 800. The building is to be completed by the end of the year. Situated at the southern end of Cornwall Street, the structure will present a pleasing picture in Tudor collegiate style. The building will be constructed of Tyndall stone and brown brick with Tyndall stone trimmings. J.H. Punton is the architect, and he states that the building will cost in the neighborhood of $110,000 when completed. The building will run 159 feet south from College Avenue and will be 36 feet 6 inches across the front. Containing an auditorium to seat 800, there will also be a concert stage and platform at the south end of the auditorium, which will be 44 feet by 24 feet in size. An orchestra pit to the front of the stage will be 10 feet wide and 40 feet long. Organ balconies will be to the right and left of the proscenium arch. Commodious dressing rooms will be situated below the stage. Fireproof storage rooms for scenery will also be provided in the new building. Heat for the building will be steam from the central heating plant of Regina College. Entrance to the building will be from College Avenue. From the entrance vestibule, one will pass through the foyer, upon either side of which will be cloakrooms. Staircases to the auditorium balcony and the art galleries will be from the foyer. The art galleries will be situated directly above the entrance and foyer. The top floor of the new building will be given over to art studios for students and instructors. A projection room for motion and stereopticon pictures will be provided at the rear of the auditorium. The projection room will fulfill the provincial regulations for theaters. Ventilation for the building will be of the forced draft type, with all air cleansed by passing through a stream of water, following which the air will be brought to the required temperature for comfort. In addition to the dressing rooms, washrooms, and toilets, there will be a large room in the central portion of the basement, which will remain unfinished for a time, to be made a recreational room at some future time. The building will be erected from the F.N. Darke Trust Fund, given to the college by F.N. Darke of Regina. The name, the F.N. Darke Music and Arts Building, decided upon by the committee, has been dropped at the request of Mr. Darke, who suggested that it should be called the Regina College Music and Arts Building. The use of the building will not be confined to the use of the college, but will be for the benefit of the citizens of Regina, according to the announcement made last evening. Incidentally, we learn on the same page of this issue of the Morning Leader that special railway trains were to be run to accommodate heavy traffic to a Moose Jaw Music Festival beginning the following week. That Regina's Esperanto class would be holding a banquet to mark the wrap-up of their winter study course, and we also learn about a giant mud turtle that had been captured and created a great deal of curiosity when it was put on display in Weyburn. Experts declared that the mud turtle must have been the great-great-granddad of all turtles in the district, for it was, and I quote, a super turtle. That was the news on page 1 of the second section of the May 19th, 1928 Morning Leader. There were 3 bidders on the contract to build the Regina College Music and Arts Building, with the winning bid being the one from Poole Construction Company. They agreed to do the construction for $96,885, with an additional $3,500 on top of that to cover the installation of leaded glass. Other expenses include estimates of $10,000 for the heating system, $5,000 for electrical wiring, and $1,000 for the plumbing system. The F.N. Darke Trust covered most of this, but the $6,000 estimated for seating was the responsibility of Regina College. Photos of the time show that Darke Hall was much more of an auditorium than a theater. It had a flat hardwood floor, and the original audience seating could be moved. The chairs did not look especially comfortable. It's also worth noting how at every step in the planning process, Francis Darke was adamant that he wanted the building to be owned and used by Regina College, but also be a space that could be enjoyed by the entire community. He even went so far as to insist that his name not be attached to the building so that its role in Regina's artistic and academic life would be the focus. In the end, however, his wishes were overruled, because by the time the building was being formally opened in January of 1929, it was known as the F.N. Darke Music and Arts Building, and his name would remain thereafter.
So Francis Nicholson Darke was, let me get that right. It's Nicholas. 1 second. I always get his middle name mixed up.
It's Nicholson.
It's Nicholson? Okay. Yeah. So Francis Nicholson Darke was born in near Charlottetown, PEI, at a family farm, and he lived there until he was about 29 years old. Then he moved out west to Regina, which by the time, at that time, wasn't a city. It was still very much a small town with dirt roads and wooden sidewalks, kind of in the middle of nowhere. They say he kind of went back and forth across the prairies to find somewhere to settle down, and he picked Regina. I don't know why. A lot of people probably wonder why would he come to this place, right? Winnipeg was well established at the time, and there was already like a lot of oil talk going on in Alberta, so why Regina? But he settled here, and then shortly after he went back to PEI, he got married and then brought his wife Annie out here, and that's where he stayed the rest of his life.
Meet Kenton de Jong. Kenton is a citizen historian. He doesn't, to my knowledge, have an advanced degree in history, but he's poured much of his spare time into learning the stories of Regina, Saskatchewan. The quirkier, the better. Many people around town know him for his talks on the 1918 Spanish flu, or for his tours of Regina Cemetery. but he first rose to local prominence in 2017 for writing a blog post about the glockenspiel that had stood in Regina's downtown. The short version is, Kenton had been exploring online satellite images of the city and discovered that the glockenspiel, which had been taken down during construction of the downtown plaza, was lying in the mud of an outdoor storage yard. His post on the subject led to extensive media coverage, and ultimately to the restoration of the glockenspiel. The full story on that should go into another series, but here's Kenton on Francis Nicholson Darke.
So we started off working as a butcher at the farm he had in Regina, and him and his partner, Pope Balderson, they sold their meat to both the RCMP, I guess, then the Northwest Mounted Police, and also to the residential school program. So he supplied meat both to the school just outside Regina, and I think the one near LeBret. So then he would buy the share of the company from Pope Balderson, and then he would sell the entire company to James Grassick, who would be later another mayor of the city. So he had this wealth he had kind of gotten, and then he went into real estate. And that was kind of how he really became the entrepreneur he's known for and the wealth that he's known for. And he did that for a number of years until he finally got into politics, which of course has much more money than real estate. I know he had several hotels around the city, as long as other buildings such as Dark Block, I think was his, and he had some land in southern Regina. But exactly his land he owned, I don't know about. I'm sure there could be records of that out there, but I just don't know it. But I know he did have some hotels throughout downtown Regina, and some of them still are standing today. So he had a lot of hotel properties, and that was, I think, one of his bigger things he had.
Can you tell me about the castle? Was that him?
Yeah. Okay, so, well, it wasn't he didn't make the castle, but how the story goes is that in 1912, him and Annie were living on Victoria Avenue in their house just across from Victoria, at the time called Victoria Square, now called Victoria Park. And the Regina cyclone went through in 1912 and decimated all of downtown, especially along that strip. And the story goes that Annie came to him and said, "Francis, you are the wealthiest man in this city. Can you build me a house that can't get blown over by a bunch of wind?" So Annie convinced Francis to sell the land and to buy a property on 16th Avenue, which is now College Avenue. One of the things then he did was he purchased large amounts of Tyndall stone, which is the same stone used in the Saskatchewan legislature, same stone used in Casino Regina, then the railway station, and same stone used all throughout the city, including the Darke Mausoleum. And he built this massive stone house for him and Annie to live in. And they would live in this house the remainder of their days. Right across the street from the house is Darke Hall, so it wasn't that far from where his namesake would be. She would die. He would die first, and then she would die a couple years later. The house would then become Helmsing's funeral home, where it would sit for a number of years, and then later be purchased by Jason Hall to become Stonehall Castle. So it switched hands a lot over the years. He didn't make the castle what it is today, but he built the framework of it. There's not a whole lot of like Tyndall stone houses in the city, so it's one of those that really stand out on the block. And now Jason's really changed on the inside with adding architecture and railings and candles and giant armored statues. So it wasn't like that when Francis had it, but it definitely had the potential to be something in the future.
You're listening to Out of the Dark, a series about Regina's historic performance space, Darke Hall, on 91.3 FM CJTR, tuned into the community.
Now, what about the investment in Regina College and in Darke Hall? How did that all come about? Do you know?
I imagine it's something to do with before the First World War, there was the beautiful city movement. They wanted to turn a lot of the cities in the world into more beautiful, walkable, livable places. I think it was kind of coming out of like the modernization of the industrial era. That they're trying to make cities into more like communities and less like factories. So there was a lot of talk then about rebuilding parts of Regina and tearing down downtown, rebuilding structures. And there was this idea of building this Regina College campus. And that was what changed 16th Avenue to College Avenue when they started building this campus. Now, this campus was supposed to be much larger than what we ended up getting. It was supposed to be 4 columns and like a wall of buildings around between each column and then a courtyard in the middle. And if you go there now, you'll see there's one side of the 4-sided building that was actually built. And that's only been completed recently. Prior to that, it was only one side and one column. The reason for this was because the First World War started And suddenly a lot of materials that they were going to go use towards building this building ended up going towards the war. So the building was never officially completed, although it was still in use for, I would say, about 100 years before they finally added the other column to it. Also, so Francis Darke, he donated $85,000 to this, which is about $2.5 million today, and raised another $40,000, which is about $1 million today. So a total from his contributions is about, in today's money, $3.5 million. And then Darke Hall, kind of right beside the college campus, was an art studio, a music venue that he helped create and then got his namesake. But it was there where like the Regina Symphony would perform, and various other groups and artists would perform it in the Darke Hall, because Francis Darke was a lover of music and the arts. I'm not sure exactly what kind of art he loved. I know he loved music, he loved dance, but one thing that I do know he really, really loved was his son, Clifford. And once Clifford died from an automobile accident in 1926, Francis Darke brought in these giant bells, and he had them installed in Knox Metropolitan United Church. And it's these bells called the Darke Memorial Chimes that still ring to this day. So it's obviously something that's so passionate to him that he would have something installed in memory of his own son to ring and play for Regina citizens for over almost a century. So it's obviously very important to him. So I don't know if it was just music and dance or if there was more to it, but definitely music was one of his passions.
What is the deal with the Darke Mausoleum in the Regina Cemetery?
So there are a lot of great, amazing buildings inside the Regina Cemetery, but the Darke Mausoleum is one of those things that really stand out. It's right beside the crematorium, so it's really hard to miss. But it's this massive Tyndall stone structure that if you walk around and take a look at it, you see lots of fossils still embedded in the actual stone. But inside the Darke Mausoleum are, I believe, 7 people belonging to the Darke family. So Clifford is in there, Annie's in there, Francis is in there, and several others. And I didn't realize that they had actually added the 7th person only a couple of years ago, I think in 2013. So it was fairly recently used. So this massive building has these iron doors and kind of like plates over the windows. I'm assuming people can't look inside. The story goes that in the 60s and 70s, it was often vandalized, not just outside, but also people would break inside of it and steal artifacts from within. So now it's been completely sealed, except for when they have to inter a body into it. So it's a very impressive structure that has been banged up and beat up a lot in the past.
Why did he build such a big, imposing structure in the cemetery, though?
That's a good question. I was trying to look into that, why he did such a thing. In 1926, the cemetery was still a lot smaller than it is now, right? It had only been really a cemetery for the past 30, 35 years. So to have this giant building installed there would be a massive effort that I don't know, because no one else would do it. Yeah, there was other statues, other monuments there that are huge, but nothing quite like a mausoleum. And it is the only private mausoleum in the city. There's another public mausoleum in Riverside Memorial Church, but it's not quite the same scale or grandiose as the Darke Mausoleum. So why he chose that, I don't know. Possibly, I'm thinking it's because Annie felt safe in their Tyndallstone house. Son Andy's soul would feel safe in the Tyndallstone Mausoleum. I'm just guessing that's the reason. I can't say for certain, but I'm assuming that's probably why he did it for her.
It's a good story, regardless.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Ceremony marks opening of Music and Arts Building at the Regina College. Hall crowded as F.N. Darke, the donor, hands over new edifice to Board of Governors, importance of occasion stressed. "This marks an epoch," declared Reverend J.A. McKeegan in his address Sunday afternoon at the opening of the new F.N. Darke Music and Arts Building of the Regina College. Simple but effective ceremonies marked the dedication service by which the handsome structure was formally handed over in trust to the Board of Governors of the Regina College by the donor F.N. Darke. The public crowded the hall to capacity. Prayer, sacred song, and appropriate addresses comprised the ceremonies, over which presided Reverend Dr. E.W. Stapleford, president of the college. The service opened with the singing of Tennyson's hymn, beginning with the lines, "Strong Son of God, immortal love," by the gathering. Dr. Stapleford read the brief and simple words of the dedicature. They were, "The Scriptures teach us that God is well pleased with those who build a house to his name. We read how he filled the temple of Solomon with his glory, and how, in the second temple, he manifested himself still more gloriously. Truly, he will approve our purpose of dedicating this hall to music and art for the enrichment of the lives of the students of this college and of the people of this city. We are devoutly thankful for the generous impulse that has made this building possible, and we sincerely hope that the donor may long enjoy the fruits of his labor." Mr. Darke, the donor of the building, stepped forward and with brief words formally handed the keys to the Chief Justice J.T. Brown, chairman of the Board of Governors of the college. "This has been spoken of as Mr. Darke's enduring monument," Mr. Justice Brown stated, "but it is more than that. It is a temple in which Mr. Darke's beneficent spirit will live long after the youngest here have passed away." Speaking on behalf of the citizens of Regina, Mayor James McCara considered it was a duty and a pleasure to express the thanks of Reginans and their heartfelt appreciation of the gift of Mr. Darke. He also expressed the appreciation of the citizens to Mr. A.C. Froome for his gift of the organ, which will be later installed in the new building. Honor to Mr. Darke, congratulations to Dr. Stapleford, the Board of Governors in Cyril, Hampshire, was expressed by Reverend J.A. McKeegan in his address, The Value of Music and Art to a Nation. It was such men as Mr. Darke who recognized the possibilities of the field of culture in this great new country, stated Mr. McKeegan. That the opening of the building marked an epoch was the opinion of the speaker not only for Regina but for the whole province. It completed the trinity of those essentials which are characteristic of the well-ordered and complete community. This trinity was comprised of industry, government, and art. Already in the city was the monument to industry in the great new motor plant which had been recently opened. To the south was the legislature buildings, which represented the government of the community. And with this building, closely associated with church and school, recognition was now given to those things which catered to the spiritual things of man. "We need bread, but man cannot live by bread alone," was Mr. McKeegan's manner of declaration. Contributing to the program of music were Madame Alicia Hercott, Dan A. Cameron, and the Regina Male Voice Choir. Cyril Hampshire, director of the Conservatory of Music of Regina College, was in charge of the musical program. Following the singing of the recessional by the Male Voice Choir, the services ended with the national anthem. Dr. Stapleford announced that the musical concert planned for Tuesday, January 8, had been postponed to Wednesday, January 16. At this concert, the faculty of the Conservatory of Music of Regina College, directed by Cyril Hampshire, will render a program of musical features to which the public is cordially invited. That was an article from the January 7, 1929 Regina Morning Leader. On this page, we also learn about Eaton's January sale. Good news, distinctive frocks, half price. Also, Major Chester P. Mills of New York was the winner of W.C. Durant's $25,000 prize for the most practicable plan for making effective the United States 18th Amendment prohibiting intoxicating liquors. Finally, we learn about a Regina People's Forum meeting at City Hall about what Saskatchewan can expect as the Dominion government restores provincial control over natural resources. And that's something that has ramifications down to today.
My name is Kirby Wurchenko. I'm the executive and artistic director at the Broadway Theatre in Saskatoon. Started here in 2008, and I'm just about to retire from this post. I'm moving on to another job. Almost 14 years of working in and developing and hopefully exploding some people's ideas of what an arts, culture, and community space can be about. I think you had talked to a friend of mine named Michelle Ellingson Aylesby from Regina, and she invited us down years and years ago for her wedding that took place in Darke Hall, and I participated in the ceremony. I can't remember what role my wife played in that particular one, and so known her for a long time and got to go down and be a part of that ceremony, which was really great, of course, because it's so personal. The funny thing is about things like that, I mean, really, you could get married in the back of a 7-Eleven. If you're in love, it's about that. It's about the people. But of course, being in Darke Hall and being on a big, broad, dusty stage that was probably built with a lot of intention for something else.
Whether or not it's deserved, Regina has a reputation for tearing old things down. We demolish our historic buildings, we abandon our glockenspiels in muddy fields. Darke Hall, however, is one of our old buildings that has survived. Reginans have always seemed to understand its importance. The University of Regina invested in significant restoration work over the years, including a project in the mid-1980s to rehabilitate the foundation, an investment that saved Darke Hall from the depredations of Regina's shifting soil. But over time, even a restored building needs restoration. I don't want to dwell too much on the specifics. This series is supposed to focus on fond memories, but suffice to say by the 2000s, Darke Hall was looking worse for wear. So, in 2015, the University of Regina set plans in motion to restore both the College Avenue campus and Darke Hall. More than just a facelift, this was to be a complete restoration of the university's buildings along College Avenue, one that would ensure that they could stand for another 100 years or more. To make this happen, the university brought in experts, user groups, and stakeholders to imagine how to make the most of this opportunity. Enter Kirby Wurchenko, one of the many people consulted on how to rebuild Darke Hall so that it can be welcoming and useful for as many people as possible. As he said, he has long experience in creating engaging community spaces, and bonus, he has personal history with Darke Hall. That story he mentioned about participating in a wedding there, remember that. It comes back in a later episode. Here's Kirby on what he hopes Darke Hall can become.
Buildings and spaces, I believe, are kind of like people in the same way. I mean, you're not the same Paul you were in your 20s, and thank God for that, right? Like, whatever you've got in your background and baggage, there's a lot of stuff you're proud of, and there's some stuff you maybe would rather leave off the record. And you move and you change, and the world around you has changed. And so if you aren't dynamic with it, really it's your own fault if you don't keep up, and if your useful life changes and it shortens and it alters because you're very myopic, you're missing out. So that wedding was a long time ago, but it's a great memory for my partner and I. It was very personal, very invested. And just really, really neat to see that space used in that way. The seats, I run an old theater that used to have wooden seats right up until 2003. And I don't think anybody is going to talk to you glowingly about how comfortable and spacious the seats in Darke Hall were. I don't know if anybody is going to tell you, oh, the acoustics were the greatest thing in Western Canada. But there's still something special about it. Take away the comfort or take away the architectural beauty or whatever. I mean, really, Paul, it's no different from the wedding analogy. Why did people like going to concerts there? Well, because of what happened in there, because there was someone on stage who spent their whole life writing songs just to sing them to you. And you were there next to a bunch of other people who, in their own way, were connected to the same artist you are. And so you share something when you gather. And there was electricity in the silences. There was joy in the music and the choruses. There was a crush at the intermission when you try and squeeze into a tiny lobby to buy merch or to go get a beer. And I know that you're talking about Darke Hall specifically, and I hear myself answering your questions, and I'm thinking how funny it is that most of my answers revolve around people. What Darke Hall represents was another space in Regina where people could gather and do something, be educated, entertained, inspired, where they could engage in something, whether it's arts or culture or community. I don't live in Regina. I'm a visitor. I think Globe Theatre is a standard in town. I think the Artesian, the folks that redid the Artesian did a wonderful, beautiful job. And there's a handful of other kind of venue-specific spaces in town. I mean, the Exchange has been the Exchange for a long time. And whether you or I think any of them are architecturally beautiful, or whether we think they're dumps, or whether we think they're somewhere in between, as long as we keep going to them, as long as we keep gathering, as long as people keep animating those spaces, then it really adds to the value of your life, and it adds to the value of Regina and people choosing to stay there versus going west or going east or going south, because it's those moments. I mean, you're not defined by trudging to work through the snow and doing your 9 to 5 and trudging home. You're defined by what you look forward to, and when you buy a ticket for something and put it on your fridge, and you wait for 3 months and you tell your coworkers about your favorite band's coming, and you book a babysitter, and you do all those things just to do 90 minutes of hopefully magic. That's pretty amazing. And that's what you're living your life for. That's what you go to work for, because that's what you want to spend your money on. Your favorite artist, you're taking your kids to their first theater show, or their first dance show. You and your neighbors like comedy, so you go to improv together and see the Regina Riot. Whatever it is, those are the things you live for. My goal at the Broadway for the last 14 years has been to do just that, to give people a reason to want to come and live their life here. So whether it's on the stage or on the screen or in the seats or in the aisles at the intermissions, if you give people reasons to get out of their house, to get together, and to make meaning in their life. When I think of Darke Hall, I got a few calls from people who were involved in the renovation and this and that, and they interviewed me over the phone a few times, and then I came down for a half a day or 6 hours one day, did some walkthroughs and did some interviews with them. I said to them all the same things I'm saying to you. Is Darke Hall the best location in Regina? No, it's not. Is it the most beautiful architecture you've ever seen? No, probably not. But that'll be a good part of it. Like, it's great. Like, get the building done, renovate it, But make sure there's a plan and there's life in it. Because you can have, look at museums. You can have beautiful buildings that are taken care of and that are, in perfect condition. Mm-hmm. But if what's going on inside them only attracts a very small slice of humanity, then you're really missing out on an opportunity to build community. When I think about buildings, again, I don't think about the building itself. I think about how can you build community with it? How in Regina doesn't everybody kind of want to be proud of where they're from? Like, if you had a visitor, if you had a relative come from Vancouver or Toronto or somewhere in Europe, and they're a little bit snotty about, well, they come from a bigger city than you do, and they have Gothic churches that are 800 years old, and what do you got? Well, if you take them to Darke Hall, they might not think much of the architecture compared to their 800-year-old Gothic church. But if they see an awesome, beautiful, engaging show while they're there with you, and they have an experience, suddenly their experience of Regina is better. Their experience of your whole city and your people changes, because now you're engaging in something meaningful and meaning-making together. So I'm thrilled that Darke Hall's got a different look and a different lease on its life in its future. But when those folks asked me to come and talk to them, of course, we talked a little bit about the physicality and the notions of, hey, if you want to do these types of events, you probably need a better loading area. You probably need more green rooms. You probably need da-da-da. But when it comes down to it, what it's really going to depend on, and what Regina should be praying for, is that whoever really runs Darke Hall for the next 10 to 20 years, especially these first few, right? When something has a new face on it, you need to plant your flag pretty strongly and let people know, hey, this is our intention. We want Darke Hall to not just be reopened and be on the scene. Like, we want to make a difference. And these first few years are crucial to set that in people's minds. And ironically, we're back to the same conversation as at the start. It's not about the building. It's about the people who choose to run it and how they run it and how open they are. It's got to be open to the community. It's got to respond to the community. And if it doesn't, it could get dusty again.
You're listening to Out of the Dark, a series about Regina's historic performance space, Darke Hall, on 91.3 FM CJTR, tuned into the community.
Well, I can't wait for the space to start getting used. The opening will be just fantastic.
It seems like a very intimate, gorgeous little gem of a space. I think it'll feel really nice to have an audience in there.
Yeah, they'll be really, I think performers will be really excited about performing in it as well.
When the university awarded the contract to renovate Darke Hall, it wasn't a surprise that they tapped Regina firm P3 Architecture. Founded in the 1950s by Joseph Pettick, P3 has a long history in this city. They've worked on everything from commercial and residential buildings to schools, libraries. They led the heritage restoration of the Moose Jaw and Regina courthouses, the Walter Scott Building and the Lyric Theatre in Swift Current, and they're currently engaged in the restoration of Globe Theatre in downtown Regina. Odds are, if you've spent even the smallest amount of time in Regina, you've seen buildings with P3's fingerprints all over them. I had a chance to sit down with P3 principal architect James Yauk and Kate Jackson, the architect who led the Darke Hall restoration, to talk to them about what this project involved and what it meant to them. One of the things that we're trying to get at with this documentary is sort of personal stuff, like not the cold history of things, but what does this space mean to the people who use it? Mm-hmm. I guess for you guys who've been like doing it, like what did this project mean for you and for P3 to be doing this heritage restoration?
That's an interesting one. For years I've answered the question that it's really frightened me because it's such an important space for the city. And I've had a relationship to the building, even though I hadn't been inside it prior to doing this project. I knew about it in the city as an interesting space and an interesting building. So I felt a lot of responsibility, and I think that drives you to think a little harder. I mean, we're trying to be sensitive for absolutely every project, but coming up with certain details were 50 sheets of yellow trace paper in order to come up with just the perfect idea that sits the way that feels appropriate into the space.
You know, every project is important, and I've been doing this long enough. I mean, I've been in my career accused of only doing new buildings, so I hate old buildings. Yeah. And I think it's readily apparent that couldn't be further from the truth. So from, my own personal background is I have a degree in the history of art and architecture before I decided to follow through on an architecture degree. So I love history. You know, I spend most of my summer holidays traipsing around old buildings in Europe, and I plan my vacations around opportunities to do that. And I think a lot of architects are like that. We're very sort of tuned into the connection between contemporary buildings, heritage buildings, and culture. And I think the good architects are very in tune with that. So a project like this, where you've got in our city, in our environment, a building that still has the bones that are in good shape. And the bones were in good shape here. This building was underpinned back in the 80s as part of the renovation. And you know, that decision, when the building was about 60 years old at that point, I guess, saved it. At the end of the day, it saved it. And because we look at the conservatory building, and we mentioned earlier that building was coming down and it was at risk of destroying other parts of the Heritage Campus. It had not had an intervention like that. So there is a tipping point that things get to. And you can always say, well, you can do anything for money, but money isn't infinite either, right? And when you are presented with an opportunity where the bones are good and you can go in, and the university has been a really terrific and enlightened client when it comes to the project, and they're passionate about Darke Hall, so it's easy to be passionate about it. And I would say this entire College Avenue campus project is a great example of when people all have a common goal and what you can actually accomplish. Where there's some painful moments and painful decisions that were made. We talked about some of them here. We talked about some of them relative to the college building. And then the contentious nature, perhaps, of Connexus being located here.
Yeah.
But without each of these pieces, we don't get what we have.
Right.
And we don't get what we have for the next 100 years. And I think that's the perspective that we bring to a project like this.
The marquee out front, the Darke Hall sign, what were the decisions that went into making it look the way that it does?
Well, again, it goes back to the idea of this being a theater, and how do you, Darke Hall is clearly the performance space. So how do you present as a, how can I put this? Well, this area is the Darke Hall lobby. It's the Darke Hall link.
Yeah.
So during a performance, this becomes where you come and go. So the challenge then was, what do we do to connect the south side and the north side of the building, because we'll have patrons coming from both directions? How do we signal to them that this is the Darke Hall entrance, other than just a little bit of signage someplace?
Yeah.
And so this idea of introducing a marquee, or a modern interpretation of a marquee, without going to the full extent of LED lights and now showing and that sort of thing, being a little bit quieter, a little bit more subtle. It's not about flash, but having that that thing that just says, this is where I should be going. This is the front doors to Darke Hall now, in a way that doesn't compete again with the beautiful stonework and the big steps and that sort of thing, but lights up at night, provides a glow, and says, this is the entrance. And it goes back to that marquee concept. And that's why the Darke Hall signage is easily seen, but it's also relatively modest, right?
Yeah.
And it's the glow, and it's this idea of, moths attracted to the flame.
What was the typeface?
It's pulled from the university's standards.
Okay.
It's, I think, New Gothic.
Yeah, good answer.
Oh, we went through a whole thing.
Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, typefaces are always difficult if you have to purchase them, and we typically have to get them in order to get them cut, and so.
It's all custom. Those are custom cut letters. They're not pulled out of the catalog or anything like that.
Why is it important? You clearly spent a ton of money and effort and time on this. Why is it worth it?
Well, I think it makes the facility functional for a new era. I don't think that the facility, unfortunately, was very fair to a broader audience. As someone who has people with disabilities in my life, being able to bring them in the same door as me, to get into the theater, to enable them to be a performer, any of those aspects, I think is very important, and has been a mandate that's very important to the university as well, and has taught me to think about absolutely all aspects and how they relate to accessibility, and ensuring that it disappears, that it's not something that you focus on, but is readily available for those who need it.
Why, though, go to all the trouble with, say, preserving the plaster and getting the painting right? Why did that matter to you guys to do that?
It's really interesting. Well, particularly this space, I was going to say, describing its value is very difficult. But when you enter the space, you feel it. It sort of warms the cockles of your heart, and it becomes, you immediately recognize it as a valuable space. And that's clearly had quite a broad appeal, because a good portion of this project was funded by very involved people, very invested donators. So that tells you how important the space is to so many people. And it's something that I don't think you have to be involved in the history to feel.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think that my wife calls it touch old. We have to go away to Europe, and this summer we'll touch something old.
Right.
And there's that. I think it's just human nature. If it's in our culture, it's about how buildings are sort of witness to that history, and I think having some of those elements within this building. I think this building didn't have that feel. When you went into the basement of it before the restoration, it felt like the kind of a 1980s institutional space, and it lacked that soul. And that soul was still there. It just needed to come out. So as you saw through the walkthrough, not every single thing was restored to the way it was. A lot of it was reinterpreted in the spirit. And I would say that spirit and that soul of the building it's reemerged through the process. And that becomes, it's almost this, it's a very difficult thing to put your finger on as a designer and as an architect, but as Kate says, the patrons feel it. We feel it too. We maybe even feel it more acutely than a patron would feel it.
What are you guys going to remember? Like, what's going to stick out in your head 10 years, 20 years from now when this is done?
Different stages of our careers, Kate.
Absolutely. For me, I think it's a unique perspective. At least at this point in my career, I'm still able to really intimately get to know buildings, which I think will change as time moves on, because you're less into the details and become more on the management front. But I've dug into every set of drawings I can find on this building. I have spent time on every detail that has been installed. I've spent time talking about the windowsills and the masonry and the painting and absolutely every little aspect. So I very intimately know this building and have spent a lot of time with it. And that's something that I may not have the opportunity to do again for a long time.
That's very true. I'll look back at my career and there will be a half a dozen projects where I can say this will be around for a long time and this had a profound effect on the way people experience the city. And Darke Hall and College Avenue campus will be, in the top few, for sure. And that's kind of interesting if you think about it, because there's lots of new stuff. I mean, obviously everything else, or not everything else, but a lot of new significant projects that the firm has done, but they just won't be here. This will be. College Avenue campus is going nowhere as long as this society exists. These buildings will be here. Will the provincial lab always be there the way it is? Well, maybe not.
Yeah.
Will the commercial retail projects we do be there in 100 years? Absolutely not. Right? But this will be. Yeah. And just like Punton has his DNA is all over this, the P3A team's DNA is now all over this. And it will be through my life, it'll be through Kate's life, it'll be through the lives of everybody that worked on the project and their children and their children's children. And it becomes a generational relationship that you have with the project.
Nice.
That's rare.
Nice. Splendid program marks first recital given in the FN Darke Music Hall. Like a new home set in order for its first housewarming was the FN Darke Music Hall last evening, when members of the Regina College Conservatory of Music combined to give the first musical recital held in the new building. The program was given under the direction of Cyril Hampshire, musical director of the conservatory. Eager to see the interior of Regina's newest arts building and interested in the excellent program planned, an appreciative audience filled the auditorium to capacity long before the program commenced. Opening with an overture by the Regina College Junior Orchestra under the direction of W. Knight Wilson, the evening's entertainment was colored with promise of what was to come. Reversing the general order of vocalists, Miss Doris Williams saved the outstanding number of vocal solos for the last. In this, her Ave Maria was a dramatic achievement in its own right. Two very effective readings were given by Mrs. A. M. Westmoreland, teacher of expression at the college, and vocal numbers were given by Madame Alicia Burkett, including that dainty number, "There Are Fairies at the Bottom of Our Garden." An outstanding number of the program was the Sonata 55 by Mozart, played on two pianos by Miss Martha Somerville and Cyril Hampshire. Dan A. Cameron, always a favorite, gave a group of songs. To bring the evening to a whirlwind close, a trio consisting of W. Knight Wilson on violin, Dr. Harry Rosenfeld on cello, and Cyril Hampshire on piano played the first and last movements of Mendelssohn's Opus 49 in D minor. Present in the audience, it was announced, were representatives from outside districts including Stoughton, Kisbee, Arcola, and Wilcox, who had traveled to Regina for the purpose of hearing last evening's recital. That was an article from the January 17, 1929 Morning Leader. On this page, we also learned that nothing is impossible to the new orthophonic Victrola, the world's greatest choirs, the finest organs, magnificent orchestras, all for you. A great organ plays just for you. Victrola. Our thanks to Kenton DeYoung, Kirby Werchenko, James Yauk, and Kate Jackson for taking the time to share their thoughts and stories of Darke Hall. You have been listening to Out of the Dark, an exploration of Darke Hall through stories. This series was made possible thanks to the generous support of Sask Arts and the University of Regina Conservatory of Performing Arts. Darke Hall is situated in Treaty 4 territory, the traditional home of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota peoples, and the homeland of the Métis-Métis Nation. Music for Out of the Dark is from Mozart's Dissonance Quartet 465, and performed by Christian Robinson and Heng Han Ho on violins, Jonathan Ward on viola, and Simon Fryer on cello. They are Regina Symphony Orchestra performers. I've been your host, Paul Deshane. Thank you for listening.